Hi guys, I hate to say it, but I told you so. I said during the riots that took place this summer, give it 6 months and the right-wing media will be back egging on the worst in society over misinformation about immigration, asylum seekers, and the use of hotels. Here Peter Whittle, the founder and director of the New Culture Forum and leader of the Brexit Alliance, poses the question, why is there no sympathy for why people came out on the streets and rioted in the first place? Have a listen to this.
The thing about those, what happened with those mini riots, whatever, protests, no sense of sympathy whatsoever for why people might actually be out on the streets.
Okay, before we continue, why is there no sympathy? Well, there's no sympathy because the people who claim to be concerned about immigration directed their protest at whom? At the asylum seekers. Because, look, I don't think they have a legitimate claim to be concerned, but if they were concerned, if they were truly concerned, why didn't they go and protest outside the Home Office? Because it's the Home Office that decides where people are accommodated. So if your problem is with asylum seekers being accommodated in your town or in your village or in your area, then wouldn't it make more sense to protest against the people who made the decision to put them there, as opposed to the people who had no choice in the matter whatsoever? So I have no sympathy for people who came out and protested, and certainly no sympathy for people who attempted to burn down accommodation that was there to provide that accommodation for asylum seekers.
What happens whenever we have a riot in this country, like if you think of 2011 in London and other riots, I mean, going right back in the 1980s, Brixton riots, Toxteth riots, I remember, people condemned the violence, rightly, as we all do. No one's, basically trying to justify that. But there was always this sort of thought, what is behind this? Let's look at what's behind. Why? Why do people feel?
George Floyd, for example.
Yes.
And they didn't even condemn his violence and his issues.
Why do people feel this way? We should address the underlying issues. How many times have you heard that? Yeah. Except for this one.
What are you talking about, except for this one? So what is the underlying issue for the people who came out and rioted? Well, the underlying issue seems to be misinformation. People like Nigel Farage and Andrew Tate were asking questions, suggesting that information was being withheld from the public for political reasons. That was the suggestion. So people came to their own conclusions. So people who had a massive platform were suggesting that something underhand was going on when they knew right well that the police could not issue certain information and not make public certain information for legal reasons. Now, people like Nigel Farage understood that, but decided to ask his questions anyway, knowing that the public would react in the way that they did. That's why they were called the Farage riots. So you're comparing apples and oranges here. When you talk about what was the underlying issue in the recent riots was misinformation. The underlying issue in other riots was maybe wealth inequality or government policy. Now, if you want to extend it to, wasn't this about government policy as well? No, not to a certain extent. Well, to a certain extent, yes. But if you're complaining about housing, if you're complaining about stress on the NHS, who is ultimately responsible for that? Is it the asylum seekers who are in these hotels or ex-hotels, or is it the government? It's the government that decide how the NHS is run, how much money is put into it, if it has the resources necessary. It's the government that decides how many houses are going to be built, not the asylum seekers.
There was no attempt to actually get to what was behind it. Nothing. It was just coming down on it like a hammer. No one said, well, what's actually behind it? What's the anger? And we have our media, unfortunately, on the whole, to thank for that, because they don't go into it. They just immediately take the sort of same line as the Prime Minister did, which is that these are just kind of far-right thugs.
Okay, then what else would you describe these people? How would you describe somebody who attacked the police as other than a thug, unless their motivation was justified, unless they were defending themselves? What would you describe somebody who attempted to burn down an asylum centre with people inside if their motivation was, I don't want asylum seekers in this country? These people say, stop calling the protesters or rioters far right. Then please tell us what we should describe them as. Even the Daily Mail.
Yes, I think they're all becoming much of a muchness now, Andrew, really. I mean, you know, including the Mail.
It's sort of them against us. Yes. Social media influencers.
Who is us in this discussion? Them against us. So the right-wing media, mainstream media, is against us. Who is this us?
Yes. I mean, with all my reservations about Twitter and all my reservations about social media generally, I have to thank God for it, actually, in a way, because it's the only way, in fact, you're going to get certain kinds of information now. But I just think it was very telling that there was no allowances made whatsoever for the reasons that people might have just gone a bit wild, which they did. As I said.
So that was it. It's not that these people were egged on. It's not that these people were given misinformation. It was not that these people had been constantly drip-fed over the last number of decades this idea that there are people coming into the country and they're getting a free house and they're getting a free car and they're getting a free mobile phone, and the government is not looking after British people. They're putting these people ahead of British people. None of this was part of the narrative. No, it's just a few people went a bit crazy.
No one is saying what they did was right if they kind of set light to put it. We have to say that, of course, but you should at least try to address the underlying issues. There was no attempt, and there is none attempt.
I keep coming back to this point. If these people had a legitimate protest, then why didn't they protest the people who were in charge? Why didn't they go to the Home Office? Why didn't they go to Whitehall? Why didn't they march around London? You know, while I disagree with certain aspects of the recent farmers' protest, at least they went to London. At least they brought their protest to where the government is. But these people, instead, during the summer riots, they attacked people who have no power, no influence, the asylum seekers in these accommodation. Why didn't they go to Whitehall? Why didn't they go to the Home Office? Why didn't they protest outside that office? Wouldn't it have made more sense? You would be trying to influence those who actually make the decisions. But instead, they went and attacked members of the public. People who were going to work in the NHS. A couple of nurses were attacked on their way to work because they were foreigners. Because the rioters, or protesters, as these people like to call them, pointed them out as somebody who's a problem. I had said at the beginning and during these riots that give it a few months and we'll be back to square one. And we are back to square one. Once again, right-wing media talking about how all these hotels are being booked up by foreigners, 5-star hotels. The rhetoric was on pause for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and now we're back to square one again. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.